Welcome back to Chatting GPT, the podcast where I get to speak to interesting humans who are implementing AI. I'm your host, Maryrose Lyons of the AI Institute, and we're going to go into the second part of an interview with Sean Blanchfield of Jentic, this time where he's talking about agents, agentic AI, Jentic, and all of those exciting things. So let's go straight into the show. So tell us a little bit about your vision. What is Jentic? What is it? What's the problem it's solving? And what are your thoughts on the immediate future?
Sure. So Jentic is an Irish startup founded by me, Dorothy Creven, and Michael Cordner. We're one of maybe the best funded startup in the country at the moment. We're starting out with 4 million in pre-seed funding in 2024, led by Oxstone. And it's Jentic as a play on the word agentic. We're focused on enterprise. And when we stand back and look at AI and the real opportunities here, it's really about automation, just like computers have always been in an enterprise and business context. What's different here is that with AI, you can automate all the things you could never automate before because they're a bit fuzzy. And if you do it right, you can automate at a scale you could never automate before, right? Because you don't need human coders coming in from some consultant to come in and write a whole bunch of Java for you, which you have to maintain for 20 years because the AI can do that. So the goal here is automation, but for it to be useful, you've got to connect it into your systems. And picture like in everyone's company, every listener, right? You have lots of people sitting at computers in many cases using applications, different kinds, right? It might be accounting packages, monitoring for bids, certainly email, a variety of spreadsheets, all kinds of communication systems, project tracking systems, and so on, right? And you have people there performing workflows, which are chores. And there's lots of other productive things they could be doing. And there's always a backlog and work gets done late. And sometimes there can be human errors in it, and it happens. The lateness can translate into opportunity cost, contracts not won, mistakes not found early, all that kind of stuff.
AI does make errors, but like human error can also account for an awful lot of costs, especially in a lot of, say, massive engineering or architectural projects.
I mean, you're dealing with, let's say, slightly fuzzy or subjective situations. There's going to be errors, whether a computer or a human is doing it. But AI can also check for errors. So you can start adding, if you arrange it correctly, you can add more and more of it on. It can check for errors in human work. It can check for errors in the other AI's work, right? So the opportunity here is to go in and automate all of that so that you can do a lot more business. The first challenge is connecting into those systems. That's difficult. It's always been difficult. Some of these systems in companies we're working with, and we're talking to large companies, right? It's companies that are large enough to have internal software platforms. In some cases, it's banks, insurance companies, airlines, airports, right? Online booking platforms. It large global financial services companies, telecommunications companies. Everyone is trying to do the same thing, right? Get the AI advantage without ending up painting themselves into a corner they just can't get out of. So it's cross-sectoral, right? But these kinds of companies, and I'm sure the listeners here are all in successful companies of sizes that probably range from hundreds of people up to thousands, maybe more. At the larger end, there is internal bespoke software. At the smaller end, there's definitely internal bespoke spreadsheets, which is just another form of software. To get the AI advantage, you've got to connect into this stuff. You don't, however, just want to let AI hallucinate it because it's flaky, it hallucinates, it's easily manipulated. So it's not an answer to do what you might do in a personal sense and just, as we say, YOLO, you only live once, YOLO the AI onto your production systems, right?
This might be a moment for me to ask you actually about the open claw moment.
Yeah.
So January 2025, we had the DeepSeek moment. And January 2026, we've had the open claw moment. So basically an open source agent runs on your computer, a lot of hype, not a lot of security. When someone like you saw open claw, what were your initial thoughts? It is like the opposite of Jentic.
Yeah, so things move so quickly, right? By the way, in your timeline, DeepSeek, January, February was the MCP moment where everyone in our world realized, oh, this is actually about connecting everything together. And that took up. That last year's story was dominated in AI was dominated by MCP, like in terms of applied AI, which means connecting AI into systems. Now we have Moltbot, which started off as Claudebot with a W, which Claude didn't like very much. So for one day it was Moltbot, and then one day later it's OpenClaw. This is a general purpose AI assistant, which you run yourself on your own computer or on a computer to get a virtual server for $3 a month off many different cloud providers, which are totally serviceable for this. But anyway, there's a sovereignty aspect to it, and it captures a lot of people's imaginations that there's a physical box that it lives in, although it's actually just connected to a cloud-based AI in the end. It's a general purpose personal assistant is the idea. You connect it to all your stuff and you ask it to work, and it's just sitting there always working in the background. And it's just an AI, the same kind of chat GPT or Claude or whatever you might use, but it's just always on, having a conversation with itself about what might be the most productive thing to do next, right? Given given your goals, what you've asked it to do, and the things it's connected to, it might just pop in and say, I'm going to just check the user's email here and see is there anything I can work on. And it's doing that while you're sleeping. So there's no more science to it other than it just sitting there, always going, connected to all your stuff. First, this is fun, but it's nothing really new. We've had this as coders for a while. Like software coding, it's just basically taken over by AI, and it's the same thing. So we've been used to having these tools, and I often use them for personal admin, not for coding. This open source project was explicitly packaged for the personal productivity use case, which captured the imagination. Another thing is that we actually in Jentic, we built one of these, but we just didn't, it wasn't on mission for us for the reasons we'll get into. Standing back, there's so much hype and it's hard to pull things apart sometimes.
I think that when ChatGPT 3.5 landed, it had already existed, but it was when chatbot-based AI came to the masses. So what you're saying here now, Sean, is that you as software engineers have had this already, obviously since Claude Code, but then now OpenClaw brought it to the masses. So it's opened the way for phase 2, which is agent-led.
Although to the masses, really, it's brought it to the class of people who are willing to get their hands dirty and tinker with computers, but maybe quite code. It's not that accessible.
Hello.
Yeah, there's some crazy dichotomies with this thing. Like the disclaimers first, right? This thing is incredibly insecure. Right, people have already lost millions by using it. Right, one of the first things that happened was that scammers went in and took over the name Claudebot and Moltbot and started putting crypto scams in there. That these people are hooking up this agent to their lives to such an extent that they're heavily exposed. It's quite insecure. It's quite easy. It has been quite easy to take over these things, get into people's emails. Once you're in there, you can if you're a hacker, move into bank accounts and other things. So I would say using it right now and connecting it to even your email might be quite a reckless thing to do. Definitely do not want to do this in any business context, even a small business context. Consider it experimental.
I wanted to know what your thoughts were on the Linux Agentic AI Foundation. They came out before Christmas with an attempt to standardize all of this. So where does Jentic fit into that?
We're incredibly open source. To be effective at enterprise land, it's very important to embrace open source and open standards where you can. So we're all into that. In fact, we are one of the main leaders of another Linux Foundation project called Arazzo. It's a standard format for business workflows, which is very important when you start talking about AI performing business workflows. And all the alternatives are proprietary, which means as you begin to automate your business, you're automating your business on third-party proprietary platforms, which will charge you rent for running your own business for the rest of your existence.
The SaaS story.
So do you want to walk back into that? It's very hard to walk back out of it once you're in there, in one of these walled gardens. Arazzo, which is like the Italian for tapestry, right? ARAZZO. That comes out of the Open API initiative, which is the standard for API, machine-readable API information, like globally, which is also governed by the Linux Foundation. So it's their next project. The author of that new standard happens to be Irish and happens to be a member of our team. He happens to be Irish, but we only got to know him through this business. And he's one of several people from that industry, that kind of open source, open standards, API, enterprise space that have joined our company in the last year. Yeah, we're highly aligned with open standards. Open standards, if you're a business, it's the technical foundation that allows you not to get locked in and solves vendor risk. Like even right now, if you're running a business and you're going to really embrace AI, who do you pick? The leading companies in the space didn't exist a few years ago. Are you going to pick OpenAI? Pretty good bet. But then again, there's some big structural risks with that company.
Everyone has ChatGPT because it was that first mover, but I think a lot of people are falling just out of usage of it.
Interesting. I use all of them. I have Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT open in front of me right now, and one of them's working away in the corner, actually. They're venture-backed. Like, unlike Google, unlike the others, they don't have a huge revenue stream that they're funding this off. They need to turn the buck. Yeah, there's a trust issue, which is interesting there, right? Even if you're not in a free account, the fact now that the opinion of the AI might be bought by someone who's not aligned with you, it just introduces a trust issue. And I think losing trust is a one-way street as well. But standing back as a business, I think the bet you can make right now is that you need to stay model neutral, just like you would rather stay cloud neutral. This is all changing very quickly. You don't want your business to be locked into the fate of one bet you make here at this like very early stage in this technology cycle.
I think though a lot of large companies are making the decision just to go Copilot just because of that data security. What are your thoughts on that? Like choosing a Copilot as their primary LLM?
I guess it's better than nothing. It's quite easy to roll out. It's all there and it's already distributed basically through Microsoft Live, etc. It's not where the bleeding edge is. It's not close. If people feel disappointed, if the shine wears off after 3 weeks of using Copilot, which is one of the things that the MIT report from last summer pointed out, that 95% of enterprise pilots are failing. A big chunk of that report, that 95% of failures, was Microsoft Copilot rollouts, I believe. Not because it couldn't successfully be rolled out, but because it turned into a mini hype wave inside of the company and everyone generated PowerPoints to each other for 2 weeks and then thought better of it and stopped using it. Mm-hmm. If you're on basically the stuff from 2 years ago, you're not close to realizing the value or feeling it in your company. It's a mix, right? But ChatGPT generally is close to the edge and Claude is definitely at the edge. Gemini is really pretty amazing now.
Tell me what your thoughts on the old self-hosting on-prem debate is.
Yeah, you're not going to host one of these frontier models, most likely, but you can host small models and you can do a lot with that. And There's ways you can put things together where you can run stuff through a small model to redact it before you send it up to the real model. It depends what business you're in and how sensitive that data is.
I was going to say, bringing it back to a lot of people listening in here are in the construction sector. Okay. A lot of construction is about manual coordination, like lots of fragmented systems. And for a lot of these people, they don't have to have the bleeding edge. They want to have a good AI and they need to have some training to understand how to apply it so that they will start getting the benefits. Could you tell me then where Jentic would come in and where Jentic's agent infrastructure would, for example, transform like a project team, how they're working?
Yeah. The first thing is to identify all the different systems that exist. And depending on the company, it'll be third-party systems, things like Procore. Before you get into accounting and ERP and payroll and document management, if you actually do a full inventory, you might find 50 or 80 software, different packages. And at a certain scale, in some companies, you start getting into bespoke software that's been developed in-house during different decades. And that's the way it is. The first stage that we engage with the customer is mapping that all out and then connecting into it using AI, but basically making all of the systems findable by an AI that you're trying to task with, figure out how to get this job done for me. It needs to be able to find all those systems, find all the kinds of things you can do in those systems and test it out. Then we create a digital twin of all of those systems, again, using the magic of AI. But this stuff is possible to do these days.
Construction people will be very aware of digital twins.
Yeah, normally in a BIM sense, if I have my terminology correct. So for us, it's a different sense. We have a digital twin of your existing API and software infrastructure. So if it's Sage, we basically have an emulated copy of Sage. So we create a digital twin of all of that and we put agents into that. Right. So this is a pre-production environment for agents. They're not connected to the real stuff that can screw up your business. They're in an environment that the agents, AI thinks is the real business, but it's not. And we put them to work in there so they can try to figure out how to automate the workflows. And what comes out of that, if they succeed, so that's in the project management sense. The way we'd normally approach this is start looking at the people who are actually doing this the long, hard way and seeing what are they doing that takes up their week, going into different systems, correlating different data, trying to figure out who to notify about what, how to get ahead of potential issues next week that are kind of these leading indicators. And if someone's out sick, there's going to have a knock on and something that's going to knock on to something else or whatever, to try to map that stuff out. Sometimes that's written down. If it's written down, it's great. We can literally just take it in whatever form it is and drop it into the process, into the agents and say, here's a whole bunch of documents in SharePoint describing how we get our business done, standard operating procedures. Go figure out the actual automations that map onto this in the sandbox. At the end of this, you get automations, workflows, the same thing in a standard format. That's the RATs I talked about. So that's not tied to us or any other vendor, and that can be run deterministically, just basically run by a computer. You have an automation.
Can I ask you a question? As you've got a little automation and it's proven itself in the sandbox, can you bring them over bit by bit as they've been proven and they're signed off? So you're incrementally bringing it back into the live environment.
So as the agents start surfacing saying, I made one, right? Here's what I made. I think it works. Yeah. You get to look at that as a human, as a business owner and say, okay, is that actually correct? Am I comfortable with that? Correct. Yeah. And then you can basically publish it, and it's how you make that available in a production environment where it's actually touching your real systems. You have choices. It could just be another API, and for some businesses, that's all they want. It's about automation. It could be in a user interface. It's a button you can click to run it, right? or it can be a tool for an AI. And we'll see more and more of this as we move along. But what you might find typically is customer service or help desk agents today, AI agents. These can be chat. These could literally be voice. You call a number or you do a WhatsApp call and it's a human sounding computer at the other end. You can ask it a question and it'll go ping into all the systems to find the data, to correlate it and pull down the answer and tell you in real time while you're like in the field or on site or something like that. And you can't fiddle around with a tablet, but you can make a call. And then it's on a case by case basis, depending on what the workflow is and how valuable the data is. You could hook it up so it can actually change it.
So for example, okay, so I have my company, it's all set up and we've been dropping them all out into the live environment. Then is the logical next step where you go, we're already bringing benefit to the company from improving the existing processes. Do you go back to your digital twin and then start getting the agents to create improved process?
So that brings you to layer 3, which is governance. And so at the recap, I've talked about what I would call generally integration, getting all the systems, connecting to all the systems. The next layer is workflow automation on top of that. And specifically, not just being able to do it, but having AI creating the automation and maintaining it, which is how you get the scale, right? It's how, as you move forward as a company with confidence, you're on a path where you can have 10,000 times more of this than you could have when it was humans writing the software. But you still have humans in the loop for validating the workflows and saying, this one's correct, we can move forward with this one, but this other one's wrong. And you can go further in due course, like just scan the workflows for compliance.
But isn't this where the humans really kick in? I'm seeing it as being where you have the human looking at everything going, okay, those workflows are working fine. But then we, the humans, can start seeing other connections. This is the kind of cross workflow thinking, which I don't think the AI is at yet.
This is where it brings you to. First of all, you need the data. So the AI isn't there because the workflows aren't mapped, right? They're in people's heads who perform them at computers. But the path we're all on here is to take that tacit knowledge and bring it into basically an open standard machine readable format that a computer or an AI can follow reliably. That's basically what we're at.
Encounter much resistance from humans?
No. There's situations where people should be concerned. But in nearly every case where we're working, maybe because we're working with companies who are really leaning into it, they have a lot more business they could be doing than they're currently doing. So it's all about making the pie bigger for them, not about taking a slice of pie away from someone else. Yeah. But there are situations where I think if you stand back and look at it and say, if we pour a lot of like effective AI agents into a medical practice, that's great. The doctor can see 10 times more people and the nurses can help 10 times more people. But certainly I know we have a lot of people in construction in the audience. I think we can all do it a lot more. The constraint isn't on the demand side. So moving on to governance, right? If you picture you've now got AI performing all these workflows, the next logical step is, well, as humans in that future company, what are we doing? And this gets a little bit futuristic now. In that world, if you picture we have a lot of this in your business, what are the people doing? Like who aren't actually out in the field and using their hands and being physically present for something. And the answer is the humans are governing the machines who are performing the processes. It's when I say governance, it goes beyond that. When you do a lot of this, it's governance in the sense of how do you run your company, right? You need to be able to look at all the processes that are being performed and ask questions about them like, are we missing a trick? Are there other things we could be doing that we're not doing given these processes? Could these be done more efficiently? Once you have them all in one place with AI on them, you can begin to get AI to go answer these questions, but you're in the loop as a human. You're like board of governance of the automatic company. This is where it brings you. And we're not quite there yet, but that's the journey. I think that's where this all goes and where I think for our company, we will be. We're solving integration because it needs to be solved. And this brings us to workflows, which is interesting, not to run them, but to help companies get AI to effectively create and maintain them at scale. And then once you have that, the next set of challenges is how do we as humans run that company and monitor those processes and develop the next ones?
It is a whole new different set of skills that we need to be thinking about as the humans. We're all the CEO of our own role. You have to start thinking of like how you're going to control your own little area. And then if you're a CEO, you're going to be managing a whole lot of other CEOs. But that's a whole other day's work and a whole other day's conversation. On that note, Sean, I'm so grateful for the call and the chat. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. You're such a clear communicator. I think everyone listening is going to be really inspired after this. I'll put links to your LinkedIn and to Jentic in the show notes. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Very much.
Cheers. Bye.